back is that practitioners said, first, we would like to understand what are the key tools used in innovation, and what are the most tools that are used, what are improved tools, what are new tools, but also like how you collaborate together with AI, and how can you do that best. And now looking in hindsight, there were two big shifts on the Miro end, like the last month and also a year ago, when it comes to big transformation in terms of technology. So we were jumping or riding on those different waves. But what was interesting is that we also used the Miro board for creating the book. So here you see on the right-hand side an overview of a Miro board where we asked questions to the audience and said like, okay, can we improve? What are the problems to be solved for this book? And what was nice is that instantly you get feedback. And when we also pushed for the designs and the tools, we also got feedback. So I think we created a lot of aha moments. And that is also an invitation for you. So I will talk about this later, but we published the bad version of this book, and we want to publish in fall. So if you are interested, we can ship you the digital copy. We come back to that later, so that you can help us to do one more round of iteration. And the key, what I see when we have conversations about innovation, is not a very popular term. So companies don't, or teams don't like to talk that much about innovation because it feels far-stretched, it feels not practical, and there was a lot of negativity about not good return on investments. So what we learned with the community is that it's way better to talk about how value is created and where is value next. So therefore, we realized that this notion of innovation is not working that well. And when you look at businesses where we see that they are operating right now, then you see that this technology change is always the Kickstarter for these developments of new businesses, but also new business models. And I had the unique opportunity to have an interview with Ralph Hamers. He's the former CEO of ING Bank. And he said, when you look back at 2013, he said then we were still doing banking on a big screen every Sunday night to process the payments. But then it started to shift to small screens, and that was all about phones. But then in 2010, 2020 was more about efficiency gains. But he said, when I look now at AI opportunities, then I'm waiting for the next AI advisory in commercial banking. So he said that what is different now, it is very different from this first shift that he was operating in. When you look at another business here in the Netherlands about when it comes to kitchens, now we see that it's a quite traditional business where people still go to shops and not that much is automated. But we can already imagine that you sit on your couch and you have Lovable to design your kitchen based on the map you will send from your from your home or your kitchen, and then it will automatically generate with AI a new kitchen design. So we see that things are really different. And what we then realized that what got us here as a company, accounts for many companies, won't get you there to the next few steps. So that's really the stress or what you see with companies right now. And when you look at the business urgency, then you see that AI is changing the economics in every single industry. You see that based on competition, also customer expectations are keep evolving. And then you also see that competitive advantages can disappear faster because a new entrant can just introduce AI or other technology and then become the number one player. And then when you look at markets are also more unpredictable. So when you look at this whole notion of what's happening right now, then I think that is also the base for these technologies that start to emerge. So what I'm wondering is if you look at your position, either you work with a company or in a company or with a client, what is hitting you the most? What is hitting you the most when you look at your organization right now? So if you look at you can use your mobile phone and scan the QR code and then choose for an option, and then we see your responses start to emerge. Jessica, either this means that the market unpredictability is not on the radar.
I mean, you did mention you wanted to get more insights, so I think we're seeing that
Exactly.
now.
Yeah, indeed. So I think it's interesting because, like, when we look at the context, it's also important that we see why companies need to change and what's going on in that area. So what we really see is that what Jessica also mentioned before is that how can we create the best next version of our business before somebody else will do that? So given that context, then we looked into the companies that the co-creators were working and also our client work. And then we saw that innovation is slow. And the question is, if you look at friction point inside your organization when it comes to innovation, where do you see what the biggest friction point is before I will release or show what we found in these different conversations?
Hmm. This is very telling, no, Patrick? Clearly something everyone needs to. You're gonna touch on that later. Maybe now would also be an interesting time. We can invite like 1 to 2 people to share more about the friction point if you're up for that.
Sure.
Yeah. Does anyone want to share a bit more about the context happening in their org? Feel free to raise your hand if so, or share your thoughts on chat.
Okay, so I will
If not, then we can
I will
also
continue.
continue.
I think that you know what I think it is important to identify like what's going on at the moment, because you know maybe for some of us who are very much used to work with Miro, then it might be a different ball game. But if I look at the companies that we work with, you see that innovation is still a paper era model. And what do I do mean with that is that this innovation process is delivered through documents. So there is a research document. So people work on a document, and then the document is there, and then another step will follow, and another document is produced, and it's sitting in different files, folders. So it's still, in that sense, based on a paper era model. What you also see is this notion of the linear trap, is that we assume that this work starts to happen in a linear way because that's how we are wired. But in fact, it's not linear. It's not step by step. Stuff will happen at the same time. So that's what we call the linear trap, that we should not be trapped in that specific mindset. Then what we also see, the speed gap, and what we do mean with speed is it also related to the paper era. So once, if you have done your research, your customer insights, and you wait for 2, 3, 4 weeks to follow up, then you can better start again because it doesn't make any sense. So it needs to be about insights and experiment and act, put action on that on top straight away. And then the other one, what I see and what I think you also will see with the clients or the teams that you work with, it's the AI illusion. So yes, we see that AI works for ourselves. Yes, we see that it can work for specific functions. But when you really look at the whole, then if you throw AI on a specific system and you just not looking into collaboration, then it's enforcing these different silos. And that's what I also find very interesting when you look at other tools that are used in either innovation processes or other, these tools are all enforcing silos. So if you use a PowerPoint deck, you straight away work in it by yourself and you're creating this silo. And it's similar with Word documents. It's similar with Excel documents. So once you see this, you cannot unsee this anymore. And that's what it really comes down to, that we see there's one big root cause, and that is the silo. And the question is then, how can you break down those silos in order to do a better job on innovation, where you see that the market is running faster than you are able to do. So the question is, like, if you look where your organization sits today, or the organization that you work for, let me know, like, what do you see in terms of collaboration on the one hand and on speed on the other hand? So are we fully individual? Are we collaborating, or is the speed high, or is the speed low? The speed to fill this out is also low.
Yeah. People are intentionally thinking like this is, by the way, obviously this is all confidential, so feel free to share your honest answers with this. But okay, interesting. So right in the middle, at least in terms of, I guess this is also in large part, or to an extent, with what type of work they sit in, right? Like what are the factors that might be affecting this, Patrick, aside from like work size?
So, by the way, I see 19 answers, but it's still sticking in current reality. To refresh it.
Maybe we can, it seems like that is, if you actually click on the number one, sorry, Patrick, you
Here we
see that
go.
those are all the
Yes.
answers.
Yeah. Thank you.
No worries.
So when you look at these steps, then the one key thing that stood out is that we see that you need to go back to the core, meaning like the core, how value is created. So now when we know that we have this infrastructure like Miro, and we can automate the innovation process, or we can connect all these different templates into a flow, then we feel that the notion of the innovation process is even way more important to know, like, what is first, what is next, in order to do that. And I think one of the key things here is that we look at the philosophy from Clayton Christensen. Unfortunately, he passed a few years back, but his story is really around that customers don't buy products not looking for features, but more for solutions. And when you look at that notion, that is interesting, because that's where value is created, right? So the other thing what we also see is that some companies think like, yeah, but our competition is very different. We're running a B2B operation, but like if Cheska would order something on Amazon and it would be same day delivered, then other companies are expecting it from your company as well. So we see that competitors are not coming from your specific industry, but also outside your industry. And that is also increasing expectations at these different customers. And I think we stumbled into a very interesting case study that was introduced by Amanda and Tracy, who both work at J.Crew. And we were allowed to feature their case study here and also in the book. And they also presented this at the Canvas event in San Francisco last month. And what was interesting is that we were looking for a case that featured a very strong proof of this notion of a workflow that was implemented and also with the help of Miro inside organizations. And why we were looking for that? Because we learned that in the last 2 years, when it comes to either business model innovation or product innovation, is that these short cycles will be becoming shorter and shorter because of the increased development of technology. And when they were talking about this case study, I was curious to hear from them why they would pick up this job in order to shorten these cycles in product innovation for fashion. And they said it had nothing to do with either cost reduction or with a target from the company, but this was coming from the team itself, who said we can do a way better job when it comes to designing a new fashion for the new next season to come. And what was interesting is when you looked at the problem, they said it was speed was just gone and creativity was gone because we had isolated systems, we had handovers between teams, and there was a fragmented visibility that nobody had a clear picture on the whole process. So they thought, how can we change this around if we would like to also compete with famous companies like Sarah, who are able to turn over different seasons and collections in no time. So then the approach was first, this took a process of 2 to 3 years. But I said first we were looking into mapping the pain. Like when you look at the design life cycle from design to production, what are the key pain points? And then also figure out what can we fix when it comes to the workflow. So the workflow, all the end from figuring out like what are the key trends done by influencers, what are the key new ingredients when it comes to fabric, or what are new colors and what are new items. And then they started to do that all the way, and then also see if then in the end tech could also help to solve those problems. So they looked into many tools, but in the end the Miro board was the crucial infrastructure on designing that whole workflow. And there's a video available. I haven't put this in this board, but they show also that when they open the Miro board, they have these fashion items with a whole set that is created by Miro. They have the color palette that can also be introduced, and then pictures will be rendered, and that's how they connect the whole workflow. So I find it was interesting how they took that on, and what they actually call it right now is the live work table. So it's a collaborative environment where designers and also merchandisers, but especially also external companies who will do the procurement and logistics, they were also part of that process. So now you see that what they found important is that they say creativity doesn't stop with meetings or doesn't happen in the meetings, but it's now a real-time visibility, and there's one single source of truth when it comes to the whole collection for the new season or the new pre-season. So, and I find it fascinating to hear from them that it wasn't a target like an internal consulting or external consulting company came up with that idea, but it was coming from the team themselves, and they really wanted to fix this job. And when they took out the friction, then they were really seeing that, of course, alignment in terms of visibility, quality was better, but they found more important was the whole creativity. And I find it fascinating that if you are a designer and you are putting these designs and the collection together every single time, it's a really big step in order to share all of that information with all the others to co-create, because we can imagine also that people would keep that for themselves. So this was the outcome of that process. And when you look at the implementation strategy, I find it interesting that they also said, we're not looking at each and every one. We're looking at the super adopters. So people who would like to move things first. Also, they have 3 different brands inside that company, but it was not that they took all of them, but just a single brand to start, and also figure out what can go wrong and what go right. And they also said we are very open and honest about that. So this is not the story that is a big success. We were also really talking about what would go wrong and what went wrong and why did it go wrong. So we were not pushing people, but we were really sharing information and knowledge on what we could improve. And also to say, like, we were looking for progress over perfection. So knowing what you see right here in this case study, then this also has deeper lessons of how you do the value creation in the right way. Meaning, if you look at this part, you are familiar with the value proposition canvas. We designed a new one with the community. It kind of looks like this, slightly similar, slightly different. But we really know what is a job to be done when we know these customers, and then can we really frame the clear problem? And there was also for this process, like what is the key problem that we try to solve here when it comes to these new collections? And then when we look at the design, what would that look like? So we see that this value where we look at customer and then frame the problem and then design the value is even more important. And then when we interview different people, also within Miro, then we had this big aha moment when we were working on the book, because we thought this is not about a better or faster innovation process. And yes, it's about a tool, and yes, it's about the Miro infrastructure, but it is all about collaboration. So we figured out that when you look at the market and when you look at the way companies have been organized and designed, there is no such thing that you have an infrastructure where you can collaborate. So this is something that really stood out, and we call this then the Augmented Collaboration operating system. And we're still playing with the design and the elements, but what you see here is what we wanted to make clear is on the right hand side. Let's say, okay, you're working with your own team, with physical people, and then also you can add agents to that. But how do you collaborate with AI? How do you collaborate with agents? That was a key question of our co-creators. But when you look in the middle, I think exactly what's in the middle is the shared canvas. And this is the digital canvas, and we call it now Miro. And that also has different layers, how you can work with that infrastructure. And we see one clear thing is the loop. I will show you, you're familiar with that. It's called Discover, Define, Deliver. But then on top of that, we see the workflows. And this is something that is really, really crucial. We saw that all these companies now are able to shorten these different workflows, but they also would like to get clarity on that. So once an innovation is done and they have a new customer problem, they need to understand, when is this turned into a product? When is this turned into a go-to-market strategy? And how are we going to make money with that? So the notion of the loop, the workflows, and then, of course, you're familiar with the blueprints in order to make sure that new workflows can be designed from scratch, but also with an instant. And then the key thing is all about the principles. And this is the way companies work together, but especially also how Miro is collaborating internally with their teams. And this was fascinating when we started to interview more Miro people, and I will come back to you a little bit later. One thing that we also saw when this, I mean, you're familiar with the double diamond or with the diamond or with innovation process, but I think what stood out for this part is that we used to think about a design thinking process, but design thinking and design thinking process is something that was not very popular in the last few years, because a lot of companies and C-suite or C-level people start to question the added value of design thinking. And they said, like, this is too weak and it is really result into new business opportunities. So that's one thing what we learned. The other thing what we learned is it was too extensive. So you had design, you have development. But when you use words like design, people think, oh, that's not for me. That's for designers. Or if you talk about development, oh, this is for developers. So we believe that this is the language, and it's already quite here for quite some time. But this is business language because people understand what Discover is about. You know that you need to define your objectives based on your discovery experiences, and then you need to deliver. So we felt it's short, crisp, clear, and therefore better than the design thinking process. And this is an interview we did with Dom. He was super helpful in also identifying, also to maybe bring to light what maybe was obvious for Miro people, but not from outside, is what are the key principles when you know that you need to take away these silos and you're really going for a collaborative operating system. So I have 3 of those items for you. We figure out there were 9. But before we do that, I would like to understand, like, how open is your organization by default? So one of the key principles is, if you would like to collaborate, that we just talked about the designer in that J.Crew environment, you need to be open by default. Everything needs to be crisp, clear, and shared with everyone. And the question is, how open is work in your organization? interesting how this is evolving, starting first on the right-hand side. Maybe the person who was open was straight away open to respond as well. And I think we also included an interview from a Oxford leadership professor called Steve Mostyn. And he said he has very interesting questions he asks. And he said the question would be, how is work organized here? So how do we organize work in our company? And there's also something to look into whether this is open or not. So not by surprise, we see that when it comes to these principles, is the first one is open by default. So the teams need to be able to have access to everything. So nothing should be behind closed bars. Another one we figured out, and is also the shirt here I'm wearing, and this is the notion of the bad version. And this is actually coming from Jeff, who is the chief product officer at Miro. And he said, when we're used to polish all these new ideas and we polish it way too much, then we feel that it is already too late to share, but we also feel that it's too much polished. So we're hesitant to give feedback, because if it looks beautiful, you think this person has spent ages and is not open for feedback. So I think this notion of sharing the bad version is something that you can send out early. And but Dom also said, it's not the golden route, because it also creates more bad versions and a lot of feedback and so on. But I think showing the bad version is clearly one big step. The other thing what also associated with that is that we should also share Miro boards that are super ugly. We don't need to polish the boards until they're super nice to look at. And also when you look at the different steps between those processes and departments, if you can take out the reporting time, and if you use Miro, where the information is as a context in that board, then that also saves a lot of time. And then the other one is dog fooding. I find that dog fooding inspiring. Why? Because the dog fooding also said that if you start to work in a new way, so if your clients or you and your team start to work with Miro, then you also need to hold on to that, also through bad times, or if you have challenges on the way, because otherwise you fall back into the same old way of working. So really figure out that you do the dog fooding and keep eating the dog food as well. We created the wonderful visual in the book, by the way, on dog fooding. Another one is interesting when it comes to how you work together as a human together with AI. And this was a chapter that was already written by Anna from Miro and Andre, the CEO from Miro, and that we tapped into and tried to figure out how can we make sense of that. And one of the pictures that I very much like is when you look at workflow, is that the work is done by human, but then the flow is how AI can move that around, or how can AI accelerate that. So when you look at the left-hand side, when it comes to work, then human, they set the intent, meaning you frame it, figure out what is the problem, and you own that call. And then AI can help you to explore it in research, etc. But you first need to set the frame or the target. And then you do the interpretation, you refine it or you define it, and then it can help also to execute. So this is one perspective to look into that. And then the other one is also what stays human. These are your superpowers. It's about the empathy and the collaboration part. It is about curiosity and creativity, but also the critical thinking and knowing what data or information is missing, and also being able to do the ethical judgment and intent. So in the book, we also dive a little bit deeper, and you're familiar with Miro, so also knowing how to work with agents. But it's interesting to also make more clear on how it can help you to do a better job and what way to look at that. So then, if you look at how to get started, we do a lot of sessions also with Miro. Here I'm in the discovery room here in Miro headquarters in Amsterdam. And then companies sit here, teams wonder how they can work, and they said all the time, how do I get started? And I think one thing is interesting. We did an interview with Martin, and Martin is an innovation manager responsible for many, many companies, their innovation function in the Nordics, in Europe. And he said, once you start this journey, it is not about innovation, it's about how you make time in your head, in your company, with your team, in order to start to get going. So there's more to it than just starting the innovation exercise or engine. So we also emphasize that we say, okay, how can you start something small? And then we said, okay, you can start with the bad version of a workflow, for example, but don't ask for permission. We see a lot of companies and teams starting to have big debates and they never ever start the game. So now also when you look at the World Soccer Championship, we can talk about it for ages, but if somebody is sent off the field in 1 minute with a red card, the game is completely different. So here we see that in this process, we said like, okay, select a pilot, find a problem, design a workspace, and just get it going, and then see if you can run the first workflow, and then see if you can just scale and learn from that. So I think once teams are in that space, then it's a way easier job. So if you think of your clients or your teams, if you would like to get started, what is the biggest blocker when you think about the starting such a program, or starting to first work with Miro, or starting to first collaborate with teams? The QR code is, but if you have the code, then you can continue answer, right?
Yes, you can. And for those who just joined us, I put in the link on chat again, just in case you want to share your answer. But I think here, Patrick, it doesn't look like the QR code is appearing, so perhaps you can just do a bit of a refresh.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Just go in and out of the presentation. That should work. Thank you.
Go back to it again. Oops. Here we go.
No. There. Oh, okay. That's something I will report after.
Okay,
In-
so we
Go.
continue, right?
In the app, it actually doesn't allow you. It says waiting for next activity, just so you
Yeah,
know.
that's
Yeah, it's
also
true.
what appears on mine.
Yeah.
I'll report that. This is an open experiment for us.
Oh, that's great.
Well, definitely, that's on our end. Anywho, we can maybe move to the next one first, Patrick.
Yes.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
So I think that one thing what I started with is we were able to spend like 1.5, 2 years on the content, and I see that these are a lot of questions that teams have on the innovation process, on how to collaborate. So what we are pushing out is, on the one hand, the templates through Miro boards, but also the book. And if you are interested, and I would really like to challenge you to dive deep into the book and the content, and given your perspective on as a Miro expert, hey, what is missing, and are there still stuff that we can do a better job? Because what I like is that we started this journey 15 years ago with the paper canvas, but now it's a digital canvas. It is a different ballgame, and I'm really looking forward that we can help people, teams, in order to do a better job by knowing how to do that. So then we can supply you with the digital copy, and we will process information so that we can publish in fall with the real version. And on the templates, we will keep doing that in the Miroverse, and also create a blueprint about this process. So that was a few slides in 45 minutes, but I'm also curious to hear from you, like what resonates when it comes to these specific topics. Do you have questions, or would like to build on some of these ideas?
Before we head, thank you, Patrick, for taking us through the thinking and sharing a lot of examples, also Miro examples of what you've seen while you were creating the book. For those of you who have questions, just feel free to raise your hand so we can do it in a bit more of an orderly manner. And if you're feeling a bit shy or you're on the go, you can also drop your question in chat, and we can definitely get to it. I'm sure people are thinking right now, so maybe I can start off with my own question first,
Sure.
if you don't mind, Patrick.
No, for sure.
I mean, you were talking a lot about like earlier around when people are just starting, they should start with almost pilots, right? When you're experimenting with new ways of working, start small. Like, how do you actually make sure that these efforts don't become silos of their own again? How can teams
Yeah.
ensure that?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question. So one is if you look at what is causing or building these silos, that is something to look into. So, for example, we were working on a project in a growth strategy, and then we had this meeting, and then afterwards somebody said, "I will create this PowerPoint deck with the whole approach." Okay, somebody else said, "I will do the research and I will take part of that, and I will start to report." And somebody else said, "Hey, I'm going to write this Word document, etc." And that is again an assumption that people step away from the meeting and then start to work in this funnel, and then in the end, they're like, "Oh yeah, I finished the document," and then they send it to everyone by mail, and they assume that then the big debate or discussion is going to happen or that the document is finished. And I think these are the key moments that we should talk to people and say like, hey, what if we co-create this from the start? So for example, what we did with a team is when we were looking at performance of shops in the Netherlands for a specific client, we looked at a qualification of A, B, C, and D level shops. But then we said, how can we get a better understanding of what ABC looks like? And how can we create companies to move from D to C to B to A? So what we did, we created a big board in Miro. We said, what are all the characteristics of A qualifications? Threw it in, created the summary, read it through, and thought, hey, maybe this starts to make sense. We did a similar for B, similar for C. Then we had a comparison within the Miro board between A and B and asked for a transition plan. And then we learned that in 3 hours' time, we were all looking at the same information. We were all on the same board. And it was, in fact, a bathtub that was filling up with water, but that, as a comparison, as knowledge, that we were all looking at the same information. And it saved people a lot of time. And I think what would otherwise have happened is somebody would said, I will create the plan and I will do the definition of these specific shops. But no, it was something that we could create all together. So that is, I think, what you'd be aware of. If we move into those silo tools, that's the point that we should think, hey, stop. How can we do this differently?
I love how, aside from like just creating that culture of openness, tooling is again very biased, but tooling seems to be a critical part of it as well. And any other questions from people or your own reflections on how innovation is actually happening in your own workplace? Anything that you'd like to share? If not, I can go barrage it with a lot more of my questions, but I don't want this to be my personal Q&A.
Because I see one question coming up from Roger.
Sure.
And what you noticed is, especially at big clients, is the need for multi-speed processes and diverse way of working to handle both legacy innovation and fast innovation. And do you have an example of where you see that the fast integrated, fast-paced online collaboration together with core transformation with existing development teams? I think that what I'm seeing is that once we are accepting that Miro is there to help us out, then we try to first think with teams, how can we fill up the boards with all the information that's out there, and then share that and make that information better, and then start with that. So that's one end. What I also see is that that innovation process, and also in terms of development, it can now be done way faster than a few years back. And we are now organizing teams also in inner circles and outer circles. So if you're in the inner circles, you're at the highest speed you can ever imagine. But if there's somebody who's blocking the speed, they will be thrown out of the inner circle. And why we do that? Because we see that you can have a different speed to work with when it comes to completely redesigning, for example, a digital platform inside organizations. And then knowing that the technology is able to do it, then the only limiting factor is humans. And I think that it's not necessarily that with this development that we do something that we already do way faster. No, it is about increasing the speed because you would like to get access to the things that you don't know way faster. And knowing also that you can use this cheaper and faster, then it's more about using different opportunities to explore the solution space instead of figuring out one way to do it and then repeat it over and over again. So what I see is that this notion of speed is definitely there, but not everybody is able to come along that high speed level, and that's a problem.
Maybe also on the inverse of that, I mean, we're talking about the innovation. Which parts of the process should teams be very precious about, in terms of they shouldn't compress it at all because everything's moving so fast now. Things are much easier to do and to deliver. Which parts
I
should
think
we protect?
yes. So one is that what I see normally is that people are easily able to outsource activities like customer validation. Because they say like, yeah, this is not what we are doing, or it's a lot of effort in order to do that. And I think this is crucial for companies. First, to reach out to their communities and to, on the one hand, validate the problem, and on the other hand, validate the solution. And nowadays, you can already speed up those jobs by also talking to agents who have a specific profile. So you are way better prepared than before. But I think when it comes to customer research, this is something that you need to be very clear and careful about, because I think if you think about companies, like the magics is in the fact that you can get insights and turn them into value. And that's the most crucial part. So when you look at market research, like market sizing, all kind of market research, that can be done way faster, easier, and you can redo that over again. But that has a lesser value than looking into real customer insights. So I think that is really the crucial part.
Definitely. And we see it happening a lot now, right? I was even here, just maybe sharing an anecdote from a session I attended yesterday. People just start dumping it sometimes because we're outsourcing the thinking already to AI. It's even so hard to come up with our own recommendations and our own way of thinking. Like identifying the gaps within the data, which is something that you really need to understand where like those human or crucial human insights lie. It's harder for us to do that now. And it's even becoming more of a thing when people are just passing over that work and not really going into the
Yeah,
insights themselves.
yeah, true. Yeah. That's also what we see, that when it comes to dealing with uncertainty or stuff that is not clear at the start, people like to take shortcuts because that takes lesser energy than diving deep in there and try to figure out what it's really about.
Any other questions from the crowds or reflections? I think we have time for 1 to 2 more questions. think people were just super blown away and like are digesting everything right now, Patrick. So I do have another question. I mean, you shared a lot about the Miro examples, but you probably have also stumbled upon a lot of other interesting practical examples of what open by default looks like in other orgs. Would you be maybe able to share that? Like what other practices from other orgs would
Well,
you
well, I
want to
think at
share
one
with us?
point we had a big debate with the other authors about what this book would be about,
Mm.
and then also looking at other tools, etc. So we focused a lot on Miro because we believe that the digital infrastructure, when it comes to collaboration tools, that is in the core and in the DNA of Miro. I also said to Andre Kusit, I said, in fact, this is a love letter to Miro. But I think that when it comes to open by default, we see that in board meetings, not everybody is enclosing all information. When we look at IT departments, people not willing to share because they're afraid that something would happen or that you do the wrong things. Or so I realized that this open by default is something that is not very common, where what is shared inside companies. I think another one we didn't talk about is this principle of the central command center. And what we've seen in the past few months is that Miro really has evolved into one single source of truth, where you can share a lot of information, but also this information can be real time, like a roadmap, because the roadmap can be real time, and this is then the whole team that is looking at that same information. And I think that is also on the same side as this open by default. That is something that has really a lot of value, because we assume people look at the same information or think about the same things, and that we have this common language, but it's actually not happening all the time.
Yeah, that's something that I've also seen in other, like the common language bit, especially, and the having shared context up front is super critical to actually making these things work. Think some people are dropping again. This is a super nice session. Thank you. It felt like I was geeking out a lot because you shared so many interesting insights, Patrick. And for everyone who joined us and took the time, thank you for listening in. I hope this was a valuable session for you. And I'd really like to thank Patrick. Like huge round of applause for sharing his. Oh, I love those emojis, guys, for sharing all the insights with us. Please do support his new book, Augmented Collaboration. I'm dropping the links that are important in chat. And it's a bad version copy of the book. So definitely all of the things that you are also seeing in your own orgs, insights that you'd want to bring up to Patrick, feel free to add him on LinkedIn to maybe share those and also share your appreciation for him sharing this with us. Thank you to everyone.
Yes.
I hope to see you in the next session. You'll be hearing back from me with the recordings and resources, and I hope you all have a great day. Thank you, guys.
Thank you
Bye.
so much. Thank you.